Disclaimer. This video is meant to be tongue-in-cheek. None of the narrators involved here are dead, nor are any of them in trouble. The deaths described by the narrators are completely hypothetical. Parts of this video may be more gruesome, and the language a little more severe than usual. So if you think you'll be offended, it might be better to just not listen. Because if you want something to bitch about, I'm sure you can find something a lot more interesting to complain about than a few friends having fun. Enjoy.
The fourth death of Killer Orange Cat. I've had these weird things happening to me lately. I think they're dreams, but I'm not sure. It's like I die, and suddenly I'm not dead. So it has to be a dream, right? I mean, I can't keep coming back to life. So either it's a dream, or I'm Kenny from South Park. Anyway, I died again. It was just the strangest one of all. I was hitchhiking in the middle of the night. My car had broken down in the middle of nowhere, on a mountain. I felt like I was living one of these stories on my channel. But oh well. It was dark, and the road I was on was winding through the hills. For the longest time, no cars came along. But finally, I saw two really bright lights coming down the lonely road. A huge semi-truck pulled up and over by me. It took my eyes a few moments to adjust to the light, but I realized I had a ride. I cautiously got up into the cab. The driver didn't acknowledge me as I got into the cab and cheerfully said, "Hi." My many attempts to start a conversation did nothing, and eventually I just stopped trying to talk to her. Then, after a long, awkward silence, she started talking in the scariest voice. "It was a night just like this, 20 years ago on this very day." Ah, crap, I thought to myself. I think I know where this is going. She continued. "A terrible fog covered the mountainside. You shouldn't ever drive a truck up the mountainside in the fog." I tried to interrupt. Then why are you driving up the mountainside in the fog if you..." She interrupted me. "Worst accident anyone has ever seen," she continued. "Of course, I saw it from the inside." She then hit the gas hard, and the semi zoomed forward. As the truck zoomed forward and off the mountain road, she hit the brake hard. The truck skidded on the wet, foggy road, hit a barrier, and fell off the side of the mountain. I thought, why the hell did I take a ride from a stereotypical ghost story character?
The circus. It's a place where fond memories are made. A place where the old bring their young and experience wonder. That's what it was supposed to be anyway. But one day, everything changed. It was particularly sunny on the morning of our act just outside Jacksonville, Florida. Everyone had high spirits, setting up went smoothly, and the majority of our audience showed up early as a result. I was one of the clowns, and just like the rest of my caricatured family, I was ecstatic. Seeing smiles on the faces of children as they passed by on their way to the big top is what we lived for. The afternoon approached quickly, and hundreds of us were packed into the massive canvas circus tent. The lights dimmed, the spotlight shined bright. It was showtime. The first act was the lion tamer. I always thought lions belonged in Africa, in the wild, hunting and being free, not jumping through hoops and listening to a human's commands like a house pet. I imagined they would finally snap one day and make a snack or at very least a chew toy out of us. And rightfully so. We'd deserve it. Everything went according to plan, and after some time, the out-of-place animals were coaxed back into their cages. The audience was then captivated by Johnny and Jimmy with their identical costumes and identical faces. The brothers were high above the ground with nothing to keep them from falling except talent and luck. The trapeze act made me nauseous, and I had a great fear of heights. Well, it wasn't really heights that I was afraid of. It was the thought of falling that made me shudder. With every flip, before every catch, my heart would drop. The thought of one of the twins falling to the dirt-covered ground with a sickening thud made my stomach clench. But before too long, their act was finished as well. The next act took to the center ring. This act was my favorite, but this too was frightening. Felipe the Fantastic truly was fantastic. Fire breathing was his act, but it wasn't just any old street performer act. He had created an art form. The blaze of fire moved smoothly under his manipulation. The thought of Felipe's work getting too close to the flammable tent made me anxious. Many times cold sweat had threatened to wash away my face paint. If one stream of flame went astray or traveled too far, the entire big top would be engulfed within minutes. The audience watched with unworried faces as the fire danced mere feet from them. The tent was completely illuminated, hiding the fact that the sun had already set. With a flourish, Felipe threw his fume-filled bottle into the air and launched one final stream of fire at it. With a bright flash, it exploded, astonishing the audience. After the last flame had burnt out, he walked off the stage. The cleanup crew disposed of the shards of glass, leaving the stage ready for the final show. The main acts had all went successfully, leaving only the last round of entertainment. It was about time to send in the clowns. The light brightened in the tent and the calliope music began. It was our time to shine. Some on unicycles, some in tiny cars, we made our way around the three rings. The tent echoed with joy and laughter. Kids were smiling and doubling over from our crazy antics. But there was one kid. There's always that one. That was crying. Screaming, really. The poor kid's face was the spitting image of mortal terror. If you look it up in the dictionary, boom, this kid's face. I never really understood a fear of clowns in the circus. Lions and trapeze artists and fire breathers. Those things are scary. Not us, though. We want nothing more than to make children laugh. We want the audience to leave with a smile. People's fear turns into rage as they get older. And as their rage reaches a boiling point, things can go wrong. Very wrong. Hell, I've even been threatened. At some point, I saw him. He stood out with his dark clothes and grave expression. Then I noticed it. The flash of metal in his right hand. Before I could get the words out of my mouth, he started shooting. One clown fell with scarlet oozing from a gaping hole. A second clown fell as screams filled the tent. A third, fourth, and fifth clown fell as people exited the tent. It was just the shooter and two clowns left. My friend fell to his knees and sobbed. It was a sad sight to see. Fear, realization, and defeat under a painted smile. The six crumpled to the ground lifeless from a cold-hearted execution. It was then my turn, but my fear was changing into something else. An overwhelming feeling of rage washed over me. Crying or begging were the last things on my mind. All I could think of was making the cowards suffer. And then, everything went black. That was it. My curtain call. I will tell you that this wasn't the end. Far from it, really. I did get my revenge. After he pulled the trigger on me, the seventh and final clown, he turned the gun on himself. We found out together that there was an afterlife. My fellow clowns were still terrified after death, but not me. I died feeling fury's limit, and it stuck with me. My assailant apparently died scared too, because he no longer had that same look of confidence that his weapon had supplied. With utter pleasure, I tore his soul apart. I didn't go to heaven after that, but I didn't go to hell either. I roamed and met other oddities. I began telling my story and joined a dark carnival. I had shrugged off most of my mortal memories and became consumed with the slaughter of my friends. I was dubbed Seven, as I had been the seventh and the last clown to be killed. I wandered for decades with the carnival in search of something, but I didn't quite know what. Until now. I was looking for the right vessel, a human to warp and to blend with, someone to assist me in spreading a message through tales of justice and terror. A person you may know as Devon.
Death is all around us. From the moment we are born, we are surrounded by it. The very hospital you took your first breath in was the last destination for many people. We are fascinated by death. It's in our movies, music, news, and in the back of our minds. Death is the result of life. We each face our own mortality at some point, and the way in which we handle it defines us as a person. Some are riddled with anxiety, too afraid to live. Some become depressed. Why bother if we all end up in a cemetery? I always thought most people had a collective desire to live life to the fullest, since we never knew when our time would end. Apparently, I didn't feel this way. The letter that accompanied my corpse gave all the details of why my life wasn't worth living. I hated my job. Working the same dead-end shifts with the same dead-end people wasn't getting me anywhere. The money was good, not great. I could survive, but never really move up the economic ladder. My friends had their own lives, and I couldn't burden them with my problems. I was constantly going through life alone. I wanted love, a deep connection with someone that would give my life meaning. The men that I cycled through did nothing to fill the empty void in my heart, and I didn't see the point in going on. Living this meaningless existence was almost like being dead already. I might as well just free myself from the burden of living. My life had become worse than death. Death isn't what it seems like. At least, not for me. I haven't seen a heaven or a hell. No angel or demon has come to take me to my rightful place. There are no others here. At first, I didn't think I had died. I woke up, but not in the usual eye-rubbing and slowly becoming conscious way. It was more like being startled awake. I bet you're expecting me to explain what it was like to see my dead body, right? That isn't how it works. I didn't know I had died until later. I know suicide can be looked at as selfish. I'm putting my pain onto others. Or that suicide doesn't end the chance of things getting worse. It ends the chances of things getting better. I get it. More so now than I did in life. Maybe death is different for me because of how I died. I wasn't ready to. I didn't write that note, and I certainly did not kill myself. Someone else did.
I was stranded on my buddy's boat for less than 2 weeks before I went crazy. My friend Mark and I took his boat out off the coast of Southern California to do some deep-sea fishing. His boat was fairly simple, enough seating for 6 people, and it seemed pretty fast to me. I would tell you more, but I don't know shit about boats. He named it Hall & Oates. Not Hall and Oates, but Hallin like Haulin apostrophe. Hall & Oates, which made me laugh. We drove out into the blue for a while. It was beautiful, a cloudy gray day. I couldn't see land in any direction. Mark slowed to a stop and asked me if I was ready. I guzzled down the last of my beer and answered him with a frothy belch. We were getting our fishing gear ready when I noticed some smoke coming out of the engine cover. I pointed it out to him. When he lifted the cover, fire shot straight up, devouring oxygen. Mark fell backwards, luckily. The wind was blowing it in all directions, and the bench cushion to our left caught some flames, and it started spreading. Mark grabs the extinguisher, but when he squeezes the lever, it only sprays for a second, which didn't surprise me because it looked super old. So like I said, the fire was spreading and getting a bit out of control. We jumped into the ocean and tried to splash some water in the best we could. When it ran its course, we climbed back in. All the cushions were melted. The CB radio wires were destroyed. I had my phone in my pocket when we jumped in, and his was ruined in the fire. We had a couple gallons of water, and we figured someone would pass by shortly. But nobody ever did. We just kept drifting out to sea, laying next to each other on the floor. Since we couldn't use the burnt cushions as padding, we used them for some shade, propping them against each other like a tent to escape the blistering sun. We went through the water in 3 days, and ended up drinking our own urine for 2 days after that. Sometimes we talked about high school, old girlfriends, movies, even some of our darkest secrets. But most of the time we were silent, thinking about the chances of someone spotting us, or how we weren't going to make it much longer. Actually, I started to obsess about drinking something. I thought about chugging cherry Coke after a handful of popcorn at the movies, ice clinking around in a glass of water, the condensation that drips down the side of a cold cup on a hot day, beer, juice, Kool-Aid, bath water, for Christ's sake. I'd drink anything to quench this thirst. I hadn't had any fluids in 4 days, I think. I'd stare into the glistening ripples next to the boat, twirling my finger around, stirring up the surface, and Mark would tell me,
"Don't do it, man. It will kill you."
And finally I said, "We're already dead." I took an empty jug and submerged it into the ocean, the air bubbles escaping as it filled.
"Don't do it, dude,"
Mark said, reaching his hand towards me as he laid on the floor. I ignored him and started pounding the salt water. For a fraction of a second, I felt relieved. I had liquid in my mouth, but it was short-lived. The aftertaste was horrendous, and 20 minutes later I had a brutal headache. I hardly got any sleep that night. I kept hearing voices. Several times I asked Mark if he was mumbling, but he only answered me the first time with a no. When I woke up the next day, I sat up, and I was completely shocked. There was an island about 50 yards away from us. It was a small island with a palm tree on it. I figured we'd be found easier on an actual piece of land. I told Mark, "Come on, there's an island." Without even looking at me, he softly said,
"Nah."
I said, "Well, I'm going. If I'm found, I'll try to find you."
"Okay."
He muttered. I plunged into the water by rolling myself over the side of the boat and started swimming the best I could. My muscles weren't working so well, and my head was still pounding. Several minutes later, I looked up to check the distance. I was about halfway, and there was something on the island I must have missed. A woman. A naked woman, holding a pitcher of liquid, maybe iced tea. Wow, how lucky is this? This is amazing, I remember thinking. I continued on, but I was getting tired. I looked up again. It didn't feel like I was any closer, but there was something really disturbing. The naked woman was standing where the water met the sand, and she was waving at me, but she didn't have a head. Above her shoulders was just a bloody stump. It was at this point that I finally realized that my mind must not be working right. I mean, I jumped out of a boat with no life jacket, even though we had them, and I'm swimming towards a headless woman who's waving at me. I stop and turn to see where the boat is. It's incredibly far away. I have no choice but to continue on to the island. When I turn back around, the woman isn't there, but there is a gigantic spider scurrying back and forth, waiting for me to get there. It was the size of a small car, and quick as hell, back and forth, back and forth. I knew that what I was seeing wasn't real. I'm dangerously dehydrated. I'm hungry. My body is shutting down, and I'm experiencing some sort of dementia. I go under the water and shake my head violently, trying to get a grip on reality again. When I surfaced, I looked ahead. No island. I searched in every direction. There was no island. How long had I been out of my mind for? My only option was to swim the way I thought the boat was, but I really had no idea. I couldn't see it. I didn't last more than 10 minutes after that. When my body knew that I wouldn't make it no matter what, it gave up. I remember the first breath that was salt water instead of air. It stung like a son of a bitch, and then it was over.
Killer Orange Cat is a nice guy, right? Well, that's what I thought too. I was a big fan and I loved his narrations. What you don't know is he has a secret, a very dark one. It was a cold winter's day, a very frosty morning here in the UK. I woke up to a Twitter notification. It was Killer Orange Cat. He had liked my tweet. I had been noticed for once. I thought I would DM him in hope of a response, and what do you know, he did. We spoke for a couple of weeks and became great friends. I was heading out of the US for a short while to visit my uncle 1 month later and decided to meet up with Killer Orange Cat. I was super excited. The time came and I jetted off to the US. On the third day we arranged to meet at a Starbucks near his place. I got there and waited a while before tweeting at him saying I was there. He made the excuse that he was busy and couldn't make it. What he was busy doing comes into the story later. He said he would meet me the next day, and so I turned up the next day and this time he was there. I was delighted I finally got to meet him. At first he was a cool guy and we went back to his place and hung out. About half an hour of me being there, he started acting really weird. We were watching TV and I could see him staring at me for short periods of time out of the corner of my eye. He said he had to go to the store and would be around 20 minutes and to make myself at home and do what I wanted. When he came back, I got off the sofa to ask him what he got from the store. He ran upstairs telling me to just stay down there. At this point I felt weird. I didn't really understand what was happening and it was 10 PM anyways, so I said I was heading back to my uncle's. I heard him running down the stairs and he blocked the doorway. Hey, why don't you just stay here the night? Oh, I need to get back to my uncle's, I said. So you're just gonna leave me here? By myself? Alone? I mean, I could come and hang out tomorrow for sure. His face gave off an unnerving expression. He looked a combination of upset and confused. Do you not like me? What have I done? I was astonished. I was used to hearing his narrations online and thought he was, well, normal. He told me to sit down in an angry tone. Before I could say anything, he pushed me onto the sofa and locked the door. I ran to the back door when I felt a heavy object smash me over the head. I blacked out and woke up tied up in his basement. I started shouting when I heard footsteps echo. He was walking down the basement stairs. He had an animal mask on, with a big duffel bag on his shoulder. He came up to me and dropped the bag next to me and let out a terrifying laugh. He opened the bag and there were wrenches, tweezers, and other torture tools. I wondered if this was a joke, but then again, why would he hit me over the head, resulting in me blacking out if he was only joking? Remember at the start of the story when I said he had a dark secret? Well, I found out what that dark secret was very quickly. He walked over by his wall and opened a secret door shaded in to match the wall. There I saw dead corpses of once humans piled up. I begged him to let me go, but he had already chosen me as his next victim. He pulled out the wrench and swung it, hitting me in the jaw. He then pulled out a machete and chopped my 4 fingers off in one swing. I screamed in agony as he tortured me more. He drowned me in petrol and set me on fire. I couldn't do anything. I was in so much pain. I watched my skin melt and Killer Orange Cat laughing hysterically. My vision flashed, and that was it. I was gone. One of my idols had tortured and murdered me. Remember how I said when I first arranged to meet him, he said he was busy? Well, he was busy setting up my death by buying tools to torture me with. My name is Spook Scares, and I was murdered by Killer Orange Cat.
I was driving my semi-truck on a foggy night through the mountains. It had been a long haul, and I needed to pick me up on this dreary night, so I was blasting Katy Perry and singing along. I was belting out about fireworks when I thought I saw someone walking along the side of the road. It was an odd place to be hitchhiking, out in the mountains. I felt bad for them and decided to help them, but I also thought it was the perfect setting to mess with someone. I shut off the music as I pulled over to pick him up. I decided to pretend to be a ghost that had died in a wreck just to scare him. The foggy night just seemed so perfect for it. He opened the door and cautiously got into the cab. He smiled and said hello, but I just stared ahead, saying nothing, as I pulled back onto the road. He tried to strike up a conversation, and it was all I could do not to laugh as I stared ahead, trying to creep him out. Then, in the deepest, spookiest voice I could muster, I began. It was a night just like this, 20 years ago this very day. I glanced at him and saw him looking a bit upset. I looked back to the road and continued. A terrible fog covered the mountainside. You shouldn't ever drive a truck up the mountainside in the fog. He tried to interrupt me. Then why are you driving up the mountainside in the fog? But I didn't give him a chance to finish. Worst accident anyone has ever seen, I continued. Then I decided to hit the gas and scare him a little more before letting him in on the joke. Of course, I saw it from the inside, I growled as I hit the gas and zoomed forward. I looked at him to see how scared he was. It was perfect. I decided that was enough. But when I hit the brake, I hit it a little too hard for the wet, foggy road. The truck slid, we hit a barrier, broke through, and fell off the side of the mountain. Right before the truck burst into flame, I thought, damn, that joke backfired.
I got caught up in some strange family business. You see, my uncle is a renowned fisherman who travels across the world catching large aquatic creatures. Me and my dad were invited to help him catch fish for a good sum of money. I had massive thalassophobia and wasn't interested in going, but my father forced me to come for more manpower on the ship. My uncle met up with us as we all took a plane to northeast Greenland, where his boat was stationed with a few capable sailors. Not even a single day after we arrived, we packed all our necessities onto the boat and rowed into the treacherous Arctic Sea. My uncle told us that this particular trip was special to him, as we were hunting to catch a couple of narwhal. He was really determined to get them, as this was his ultimate goal when he first started this career. He made sure everyone did their tasks perfectly so it could help in catching a narwhal. I was fed up with being ordered to do these tasks, and was ready to just leave the boat then and there. Our argument was quickly interrupted as some crewmen spotted a blessing of narwhals a bit away from our location. We all got ready for action as we grabbed our torpedoes and spears and hurled them at the group. Most of them quickly dove into the water for shelter when we did this. In a last-ditch effort, I threw a torpedo at the remaining narwhals, managing to graze one in the head. We all stood silent in astonishment as we just let our perfect chance slip. The night afterwards was tense. Everyone moved on from the previous encounter and re-equipped all ends of the boat with some sort of weapon. Everything was looking well, at least until I overheard the meeting that the adults were having. A massive storm was heading towards our location. Everyone on board knew we had to retreat for the time being, but my uncle insisted that we would find more if we headed into the storm. After a bit of long hesitation, the crew slowly accepted my uncle's plan and decided we might as well try it. I couldn't believe that my psychotic uncle would risk the lives of several people for a freaking narwhal. I was about to barge in and object, but the crew had started to get ready for the dangerous battle ahead. The weather was worse than we expected. The boat constantly swayed back and forth as an armada of waves struck the boat in repetition. Dozens of large, deadly glaciers were nearby, making the vast and free waters nothing but a myth. Thunder and lightning was striking the surrounding areas, showing the utter bleakness of the situation and the stupidity of even trying this out. It was like Mother Nature was centering all of her negativity here. My foolishly stoic uncle screamed for everyone to endure this weather for as long as they possibly could. The first mate of the ship lost his footing as his head crashed into the side of the ship at breakneck speeds. I watched as the crew inched their way towards his body to drag him into the safety inside. The insanity of the moment made me tense up like a statue as my father yelled at me to move out of the storm. I regained my composure as I slowly made my way to safety, only to slip backwards as the ship shifted from the waves. After the fall, I was winded and became a little dizzy as everything around me seemed to stop moving. I looked upwards towards the clouds as I saw a white opening in them. This opening was everything to me. It was a beacon of hope and a sign for the future that I was going to survive this ordeal. Suddenly, a silhouette appeared in the opening. It had a bizarre figure that was getting bigger as if it was coming closer. When it came in closer detail, I came to realize what it truly was. It was a narwhal. It was that same fucking narwhal that I had injured just one day ago. I looked at his face. I saw the large bloody scar I had caused, and saw the detached expression of anger and pure, unadulterated rage on the narwhal's face as it was falling down towards me. Terrified at this point, I used all my strength I had to attempt to get up. Every time I try to stand, I slip on a layer of water covering the floorboards of the ship. Every time I try to crawl, the boat swerves in several directions, causing me to gain no progress whatsoever. Finally, my rain boots gain traction as I look confidently towards my father. I start to move my left foot to walk as I feel something sharp pierce my back intensely. I slammed to the floor head first and everything went black. I wake up dazed, confused, and completely out of energy. I look around and realize I'm moving in the frigid waters somehow. I hear sloshes of moving water and muffled sirens above me as it slowly becomes faint. I try something, anything to get their attention. As I motion to sway my arms, I feel something hard in front of my chest. I slowly feel the object in detail. It feels very straight and coarse as I brush my hand down the thing in confusion. I gaze down and realize the true horror of what really happened. The thing I was grasping onto was a husk that impaled me through the chest. I glanced back to see what did this, even though I knew it was painfully obvious. That damn narwhal was swaying me back and forth, celebrating and mocking me as it had finally gained its vengeance. I knew it was. I keep glancing at it, as motion, feeling, and life leave my body as it all ends.
The Death of Mortis Media. I awoke abruptly, with my face plastered against the condensed train window. The view from outside was mountainous and cold. I could hear the wind off the mountain, pounding mercilessly against the train. Beads of water laced my forehead as I jolted awake from the cold window. There was an unmistakable sharp pain around my neck. I moved my hand over to feel where the pain was originating from, almost expecting to find a cut. But as my fingers moved along my neck, there was nothing. Nothing but the cold water droplets from the condensation. Had it all been a dream? I recalled going down into the basement and being decapitated by a band of angry ghosts. No, it couldn't have been. It felt so real. I felt the cold feel of metal slicing through my neck. Every part of the muscle, bone and skin being cut through with ease. And the pain. Oh, the pain that followed. The indescribable pain. Could it all have really been in my mind? I looked out the window aimlessly, my mind a fog of confusion, trying to recall when and how I boarded this train. I raided my pocket in the hopes of finding something to jog my memory. A ticket, a schedule, a map, something. My pockets, unfortunately, were empty. Spare a gold coin from an unknown origin. I studied it, turning it over in my hand, inspecting the grooves and the markings. The bearings were in what I assumed to be Japanese, with a cat emblem proudly marked in the center. Where in the world was I? And how did I get here? I live in southeast England, a region of the world that is decidedly very unmountainous. The scenery, although beautiful, was a complete mystery. I looked up, and it was at that moment that I noticed that my carriage was completely empty. I stood up. How did I not notice this before? So I began walking across the carriage, wind still howling against the train. This situation was beyond strange, and my body felt bizarre. Something wasn't right. I reached the end of the carriage, and with a big, heavy tug, pulled open the doors. But fortunately, my hand was holding the adjoining handrail hard enough to fight it. The train, although modern, had connectors that you could walk through on the outside before you could enter the next carriage. The bitter cold instantly assaulted my senses as I pushed through and opened the next set of doors. Upon entering, I was met with a very different looking carriage. This one had the most delightful lavished furnishings, and it was clear that this carriage was intended for one person alone. I walked through, with no small amount of trepidation in search for something that may give me a hint as to how I got here. I contemplated shouting hello. However, the grandeur of this carriage made me feel as if I were unwelcome, and that I shouldn't be there. It was at that moment, between my contemplations, when a charming, silky voice called out from behind me. "Why, hello, Mortimer. Did you sleep well?" I turned around. A man dressed in dark jeans and a hoodie was standing there, looking at me with a big, toothy grin. I froze. No, not really." "That's a shame," the man replied. "Are you feeling okay?" I could tell there was a genuine concern in his voice. This instantly made me feel better and calmer. Did I know this guy? "Sorry," I blanked. "Who are you again?" He smiled. "My name is Jacob." I was about to ask another question, but his discourse continued before I could utter a single syllable. "Oh, Mortimer, it's fine that you don't remember. They never do. You are our esteemed guest." His words seemed to echo through the carriage and moved across my brain as if they were charged with raw power. Despite my confusion, I felt a little smug. I had never been an esteemed guest before, and yet I had no clue as to what I was a guest to. "You are so fortunate. You have the honor, nay, the privilege, of meeting Ichigo." He paused for a moment and looked at me expectantly. I wish I knew who he was talking about, but whoever Ichigo was, I didn't feel like I was ready to meet anyone important. My nerves started to get the better of me, and I panicked. Jacob, I hate to be rude, but I don't know if I'm ready to meet Ichigo. I mean, truth be told, I can't even remember how I got here, or why I'm here in the first place." He turned around and stared out the window as the train was ascending to the mountain with haste. "Oh, Mortimer, of course you're ready. Ichigo has been waiting for your presence for such a very long time. The only rudeness would be to deny yourself to Ichigo." He continued, "You know, you awoke far earlier than I expected. No one awoke this early last time. You were supposed to be here then, but I suppose it wasn't your time. Still, you're here now, and that is all that matters. Tell me, Mortimer, does your neck hurt?" I instinctively reached for the back of my neck as he said that, and thought for a moment, how could he possibly know? I muttered under my breath, "How could you know?" He snorted. "How? I wrote it." A thin smile spread across his face, the look of concern and friendliness quickly replaced with malice. "What?" "Oh, Mortimer, you really have fallen quite deep. Allow me to elaborate. Everything you saw, everything you felt, everything you knew was an illusion. Your family, your friends, your mediocre YouTube channel, all a fabrication. Ichigo requested you especially, but I couldn't write you out of the fantasy in time. You've been on this train for about an hour, but in that hour you've lived a quarter of a lifetime. The drink I offered you at that bar in Rome cleared your mind out, and it made room for the new you, the improved you, a you which would be truly worthy of Lord Ichigo." I was in shock. No, this can't be true. What are you saying? Everything I saw, I felt, everyone I knew, a lie? I'm afraid that's it, Tomodachi. You had to be purified, along with all the others in the carriages, to serve the greater purpose. A cold sweat began to run down my back. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew that it wasn't good. The train began slowing down. In unison, we both glanced out the window to see a frozen platform begin to show. The view was pristine, but nothing could calm the whirlpool of emotions festering within me. I didn't even know how to react. I wanted to lash out, but fear was taking over as the train grinded to a halt. Come now, Mortimer. Let's not make this embarrassing. Jacob said it with a hint of condescension. I stepped outside and saw an array of finely dressed bellboys escorting a handful of people from other carriages into the station. They all appeared to be unconscious. I looked around trying to plan an escape. There was nothing. Nowhere to run. There was only the train and the mountain. What if I ran back on the train and hid? Would anyone notice? Surely this train goes back down somewhere. I looked ahead. Jacob was nowhere to be seen. This was my chance, I thought. Now or never to make a break for it. I needed to know who I was and what he did to me. Perhaps there was a way to revert it, I contemplated. In that moment, as everyone was pouring through the double doors ahead, I ran back into the carriage. I looked around, desperate to find somewhere to hide, but nothing was immediately apparent. I spotted a small space under a sofa, and I dived for it. I managed to get my legs, arms, and torso through, but in the moment I tried to get my head under, I felt something hard hit me on the head, and I blacked out. I awoke dazed and confused, my eyes barely adjusting to the high level of light piercing through the room. As everything started to take shape, and I could see clearly, it became apparent that I was in some kind of huge coliseum. I was on the floor and dressed in white robes. As I looked up helplessly, there was a huge crowd that cheered all around me. The stadium was littered with obstacles and vegetation, all huge in comparison to myself. As I looked around, I noticed that some of the people who were being taken by the bellboys earlier were all dressed in the same garbs as me, with equally terrified expressions taking over their faces. Just as I was getting my senses together, a huge noise thundered through the Colosseum. It was the sound of Jacob's voice. Friends, chosen ones, welcome. Today, we have these sacrifices for Lord Ichigo. May their blood purify the ground we tread upon and lead us into greater harmony. The phrase, into greater harmony, was reverberated by the crowd. Let the purification commence, shouted Jacob. The crowd went wild, and in that moment, a huge beam of light seemed to descend from the heavens, and within its beam was an enormous creature of blinding orange light. When it touched the ground, my eyes were too slow to follow its movements. It pounced at lightning speed to a fellow victim a few feet away from me, and before I could finish a single breath, it had darted away and flung the unfortunate soul into a wall of spikes. I saw the blood pour out of his mangled corpse like a fountain, with the chant of the audience growing with every kill. I tried running, but it was futile. There was nowhere to go. I moved as quickly as I could to a small rock formation, hoping to not be seen. For a while it was working. I saw person after person being torn in half, thrown into the dirt, be partially eaten, or simply crushed to death under the weight of this titan. As one by one they fell, I sat there, with my heart beating like an express train. Then there was silence, as I heard a very faint purr from above me. Ichigo. I dreaded to think that this was the end. I had achieved so little, for it all to be seemingly an illusion. Who was I? What had I done with my life? I had so many questions. I wasn't ready. But as I looked up, it was there. Its teeth stained crimson, dripping onto the ground beside me. Its claws extended, and the eyes of the perfect predator lit up like Christmas. Before I could think of anything, a pain infested my chest. I knew it had popped a lung, as every breath was becoming more and more futile. With its huge paw, it tossed me into the air like a rag doll, and I got one last good look at it, before I was devoured wholly by the killer.
I've heard them say that ghosts are relatively harmless and cannot cause any real physical damage, so we shouldn't be scared of them. But I know better. Now, I went to this old abandoned school that I heard was haunted. It has been empty since the time of World War II. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. There are stories. The school closed down, and afterwards there was a man who abducted people in the neighborhood. He took them into the abandoned school and into the basement. In the basement he would torture and kill the citizens of the town. He did this for nearly 30 years and nobody knew it. They only found out when the man disappeared and they found him, along with plenty of other dead bodies in the basement of the school. Apparently he had a guillotine, and after he tortured his victims he would put them in it and chop off their heads. They said that if you chop off someone's head they will still be alive and aware of it for several seconds. He would then ask the severed head to blink its eyes, to prove that it was still alive. This just made what the guy did even more gruesome. Me and 3 friends decided that we would try to explore the building and see if we could find proof that ghosts exist. 2 of them chickened out and didn't even go into the school building. The third stayed with me, but it was quite obvious he was really afraid. As we descended into the basement, I could tell my last friend really wanted to run off. I wanted to see the basement though. As we got to the bottom, I shined a flashlight into the basement. Sitting in the middle of the room with a guillotine, I could tell my friend was about to bolt. I could tell my friend was about to bolt. I turned to him to let him know that there was nothing to be scared of. While I was facing my friend, he turned white as a sheet. I am not sure why, but he was suddenly more scared than he had been before. He turned and ran up the stairs as quick as he could. I tried to ask him what was wrong, but suddenly everything went black. Something knocked me out. The last thing I remember, I wasn't able to feel my body at all, and I just heard a voice telling me, "Try blinking your eyes a few times."
Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I'd like to thank Mortis Media, Spook Scares, Devon7, The Horrific Narrator, Evil Black Cat, The Devil's Interval, Lacey Lovecraft, and Cryptic Pastas for joining me in this collaboration. I have included links to their channels in the description, so make sure to visit their channels and subscribe. I'm also displaying some fan art and cat pictures in the closing, all sent by channel subscribers, so I hope you'll enjoy that. For now, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button below or use the icon of Ichigo that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and feel free to share it with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address provided in the description. My only requirement is that it is original, meaning that it has not been read on any other YouTube channel. In the meantime, please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.